Welcome to Backstage Melody. It's the most heartbreaking song the Rolling Stones ever recorded. But for over 50 years, no one's agreed on one simple thing. Who was Angie? Was she a secret lover, a daughter, or someone whose name couldn't be spoken out loud? Behind the gentle strum and sorrowful lyrics lies a storm of betrayal, addiction, and secrets that may never be fully revealed. And what if the song's most famous theories are all wrong? In 1973, the Rolling Stones were still riding the wave of their rebellious peak. This was the band that gave the world raw, electrified anthems like Sympathy for the Devil and Street Fighting Man. Their image was untouchable, dangerous, untamed, and drenched in rock star excess. So when Angie hit the airwaves, it was like the Stones had suddenly bared their soul, and no one saw it coming. Gone were the distorted riffs, the devilish swagger, the stage-stomping arrogance. In their place, an acoustic guitar, a somber piano, and Mick Jagger's voice trembling with the weight of something heartbreakingly human. From the very first line, "Angie, Angie, when will those clouds all disappear?" You could feel it. This wasn't just another track on a record. It was a goodbye, one laced with regret, longing, and a sadness so personal, it didn't sound like the Rolling Stones anymore. It sounded like a confession. The track was released as the lead single from their album, Goat's Head Soup. Critics were divided. Some praised its vulnerability, calling it one of the most emotionally honest tracks the band had ever written. Others dismissed it as too soft, too sentimental, accusing the Stones of going soft. But none of that mattered to the fans. Angie soared to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and cracked the top 5 in the UK. It became one of the biggest hits of their career. Why? Because people felt it. It sounded like a man collapsing under the weight of lost love, and that vulnerability, especially coming from the world's most dangerous band, hit like a freight train. And the timing was just as powerful. The early 70s were messy for the Stones. Legal troubles, drug arrests, personal feuds. It felt like everything was unraveling behind the scenes. So when Angie appeared, stripped down and honest, it wasn't just a break from their sound, it was a window into their collapse. And yet, for all the emotion it poured out, it only asked one question. Who was Angie? For a song so naked in its heartbreak, Angie left one gaping mystery wide open. Who was she? The lyrics were intimate, desperate, and full of pain. But Mick and Keith never gave us a last name, never confirmed an identity. Just Angie. And that simple name sent the rumor mill into overdrive. The most talked about theory? Angela Bowie, the bold, sharp-tongued wife of David Bowie. She wasn't just a rock star's spouse. She was a tabloid lightning rod. Angela claimed she once walked in on David Bowie and Mick Jagger in bed together. The story exploded in the press, igniting a firestorm of speculation that Angie was Mick's way of either addressing or deflecting the scandal. Angela herself said, "That song was about me. You can't convince me otherwise." And coming from her, it didn't feel like a plea for attention. It felt like a dare. Then came a softer, more sentimental theory. Keith Richards' daughter, born in 1972. Her name, Angela. The timing lined up almost too perfectly. Fans imagined the song as a gentle lullaby from a weathered father welcoming his newborn girl into a complicated world. But when you really listen to the lyrics, Angie, you can't say we never tried, the tone is too final. It's not about beginnings, it's about something that's already over. And then there's Anita Pallenberg, the name that haunts every shadow of the Stones' history. A woman whose presence fractured friendships, inspired songs, and fueled heartbreak. She had been with Brian Jones, then Keith Richards, and maybe, just maybe, Mick Jagger too. Their triangle was the stuff of rock legend, passion, betrayal, violence, and addiction, all wrapped into one chaotic love story. If Angie was about Anita, it wasn't just a song, it was a buried confession. But that's what makes Angie so powerful. Everyone sees a different woman behind the name, and the Stones never stepped in to clarify, not once. Instead, they watched the theories swirl like cigarette smoke in a backstage dressing room. And they said nothing. Because sometimes, a song means more when it keeps its secrets. For all the mystery surrounding Angie, the heart of the song may not lie in rumors or tabloids. It may lie in the broken silence of Keith Richards himself. By the early 1970s, Keith wasn't just battling demons, he was drowning in them. He was hooked on heroin, numb by fame, and quietly unraveling in the chaos of the Rolling Stones' ever-growing legend. Behind the guitar slinger persona was a man losing control of everything he loved: his music, his freedom, and most painfully, his relationship with Anita Pallenberg. Anita wasn't a casual fling. She was once the wild, magnetic woman who had stolen the hearts of two Stones, first Brian Jones, then Keith. Their relationship was passionate, dangerous, and deeply toxic. They shared everything: fame, addiction, even trauma. But by 1972, the fire was dying. The drugs, the betrayals, and the emotional exhaustion had pushed them beyond the point of return. That same year, Keith checked into a rehab clinic in Switzerland, an act of desperation, not just for his health, but to regain some form of control over his life. It was there, in the isolation of withdrawal, that the name Angie came to him. He later claimed he didn't know why, that it just appeared in his mind. But nothing in art ever happens by accident. Keith would later write in his memoir, "I was in a state of collapse. Anita and I were barely holding on. I knew it was ending. It was just too much." Angie became his goodbye, whether he admitted it or not. The song wasn't written to blame or to ask forgiveness. It was simply the sound of letting go, of surrendering to the inevitability that some loves don't survive the storm. And even though Mick Jagger delivered the final vocal, you can still hear Keith's fingerprints in every line: the ache, the vulnerability, the quiet devastation of a man who didn't want to lose what he already had, the kind of sorrow you can't fake, the kind that sticks in your bones for the rest of your life. And maybe that's why Keith never fought for the credit, because for him, Angie wasn't just a song. It was a wound that never fully closed. While Angie may have originated in the haze of Keith Richards' Detox and Heartbreak, the soul of the song, the part that made it unforgettable, was brought to life by Mick Jagger. It's Mick's voice we hear trembling through the verses, Mick's delivery that aches with every note, and Mick who shaped the lyrics into something so universally painful, it transcended any single relationship. But why did it sound so personal? The official story is simple. Keith had the chord progression and the title, and Mick helped finish the song while they were recording Goat's Head Soup in Jamaica. But as with everything involving the Stones, nothing is ever just that simple. Some fans and critics believe Mick wasn't just channeling Keith's heartbreak, he was injecting his own guilt into the track. At the time, rumors swirled that Mick had developed an unusually close relationship with Anita Pallenberg, Keith's longtime partner and muse. And if those rumors were true, then Angie becomes more than a breakup song. It becomes a confession, a whispered apology drenched in shame. It's not just the lyrics, it's the delivery. When Jagger sings, "Angie, Angie, where will it lead us from here?" he doesn't sound like a man telling someone else's story. He sounds like a man living it. And then there's the dynamic between Mick and Keith themselves. By the early 70s, their creative partnership had started to strain. Drugs, egos, and personal entanglements were wearing them down. Mick taking the lead on Angie may have been musically natural, but emotionally, it may have been loaded. Keith has never expressed anger about Mick's role in the song, but silence in the world of the Stones often speaks louder than words. There's a lingering possibility that Angie was both of their stories, told in the same voice, but coming from two different kinds of pain. Keith mourning a love he couldn't save, Mick confronting a betrayal he couldn't undo. And if that's the case, Angie isn't just a ballad, it's a time capsule, one where every note holds a truth too painful to speak. Just when the mystery of Angie couldn't get any more tangled, it walks Angela Bowie with a story that set fire to everything. Angela wasn't just David Bowie's wife. She was bold, brash, and completely unfiltered. A woman who lived in the eye of the rock and roll hurricane and loved the attention that came with it. And in the years following the release of Angie, she made a claim so explosive that it still echoes through music gossip to this day. She said she once walked in on David Bowie and Mick Jagger in bed together. No one knew what to do with that. Was it true? Was it publicity? Was it revenge? Angela never backed down. In multiple interviews, she insisted that moment happened. And even more boldly, she claimed that Angie, yes, the song, was about her. Not a daughter, not Anita, not some anonymous muse. Her. In her version of the story, Angie was Mick's veiled reference to the scandal, an attempt to smooth over the chaos that could have shattered the public images of two of rock's biggest gods. Was it a peace offering, a distraction, or, as some have speculated, a coded apology? The Bowie camp always denied it. Mick himself dismissed the claims as pure fantasy. But Angela was undeterred. She had nothing to lose and everything to say. What made it stick wasn't just the shock value, it was the way it fit into the larger narrative. This was the 70s. The lines between art and life were blurring fast. The glam rock scene was drenched in androgyny, fluidity, and theatrical personas. Men wore makeup, women wore suits. And behind closed doors, boundaries bent even further. Mick and David had been close, very close. They performed together, partied together, and were often photographed in a way that made fans ask questions. There was chemistry. That was undeniable. And Angela's story added fuel to a fire no one knew was burning. So, was Angie a reference to Angela Bowie? Or was it a smokescreen meant to distract from something far more taboo? One thing is certain. The Stones never clarified, and the silence only deepened the myth. Because sometimes, in rock history, what you don't say is more powerful than anything you could. By the time Angie was recorded, the Rolling Stones weren't just writing songs, they were barely holding themselves together. At the center of their unraveling stood a woman who wasn't even in the band, but whose presence haunted every recording session, every tour, and every room they entered. Anita Pallenberg. She had started as Brian Jones's partner. Brian, the founder of the Stones, the band's original creative fire starter. Their relationship was volatile, filled with drugs and violence. But when it finally fell apart, Anita didn't leave the band behind. She simply moved on to Keith Richards. To some, it seemed like rock and roll chaos. But inside the band, it was more than messy. It was dangerous. Keith fell for Anita hard. She wasn't just a muse. She was his match in wildness, intellect, and rebellion. They lived together, raised children, and used heroin side by side. They also argued, separated, and crashed into each other emotionally, again and again. By the early 1970s, things had grown toxic. There were whispers of Anita turning to Mick for comfort, and of Mick turning back. If those rumors were true, Angie isn't just a breakup song. It's a slow-motion implosion of friendship, loyalty, and trust. Because here's the reality. In the world of the Rolling Stones, women weren't just companions. They were gravitational forces. They inspired lyrics. They broke bonds. And Anita was the strongest pull of them all. Brian never recovered from losing her. Keith never forgave the betrayal, real or imagined. And Mick, if he crossed that line with her, never admitted it. But the fallout was clear. By the time Goat's Head Soup was being recorded, the tension was unbearable. You can hear it in the album, darker, more disjointed than what came before. You can feel it in the way Angie aches like a band trying to mourn something they can't name. Because this wasn't just about Anita. It was about what she represented. The collapse of innocence, the end of the band's golden age, and the final thread between three men who once swore they'd never let a woman come between them. But she did, and Angie was the only way they could say it out loud. Decades have passed since Angie first echoed through radios and record players, yet its mystery still lingers like cigarette smoke in a dimly lit studio. The Rolling Stones have released dozens of iconic tracks since then, songs louder, faster, more famous. But none have stirred the same aching curiosity as Angie. Why? Because no matter how many times you hear it, it still feels unresolved. Keith Richards has danced around the truth. He's offered half answers in interviews, once saying the name just came to him while detoxing, another time joking it was about his daughter. But those responses always felt like misdirection, like someone trying to talk about anything but the real wound. Mick Jagger, ever the performer, has offered even less. He shrugged it off, redirected the question, or simply smirked when asked, almost like he knows the answer, and knows we'll never hear it. And maybe that's the beauty of it. Angie remains untouched by certainty. It exists in a space between fact and emotion, too fragile to pin down, too powerful to forget. Theories still float online, passed from fan to fan like secret knowledge. Angela Bowie, Keith's daughter, Anita Pallenberg, a ghost, a metaphor. But the song never confirms or denies any of it. Instead, it lets you feel your own version of loss. Because the pain in Angie is universal. You don't have to know who she was to know what it means to miss her. And maybe that's why the Stones have kept it a secret all these years. Because some truths aren't meant to be explained, they're meant to be felt. And that's exactly what Angie still does, half a century later. Angie was never just a love song. It was a goodbye the Rolling Stones could never explain, and a secret they never dared to reveal. Who she was may not matter anymore. What hurts is how real it still feels. If you love the hidden heartbreak behind classic songs, subscribe to Backstage Melody. We drop new stories every single day. Because behind every hit, there's a truth waiting to be heard.